that leads into the conversation of security in schools. So, here's my question. How comfortable are you all in school nowadays? And this is going to lead to another discussion related to surveillance or cameras. So, let me start with, boy, Sally jumped right up to the microphone. Get a little closer to that microphone, Sally.
I was going to say, I'm going to be honest. I feel like...
Wait. Oh. Be dishonest, just for the fun of it. No.
All
right, be honest. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I think, honestly, since I've entered high school, I've felt more and more just kind of a little bit nervous about the possibility of, like, say, a school shooting or something. Just because, I mean, we go to a large public school. I don't know everybody in the school, and I feel like I don't know, like we get lessons. I feel like we've talked about this before. We get like these little lessons that say, if you see somebody who is showing these warning signs, tell a teacher, make sure that you like do everything you can to intervene, because it can end up, badly.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think like we're getting the proper like security that we need.
Okay.
To be honest, especially with like how often there are school shootings in the United States, like that some people don't even know about.
Right.
That's right. Okay. I'm going to go back to you on this one, Adriana, since you read the book. What did you walk away? And I say walk away. What did you leave from that book? How comfortable were you? And do you feel the same as Sally?
I do feel the same, that there is that general fear when you do step into a school building because of the history of it in the past and everything. And the Parkland shooting, I think, did a really great job of handling that really difficult situation, because the way that the author had written that book, he never gave the shooter a name. He always just said the shooter, but he gave every person that died their entire life backstory, their entire full name. And I think a lot of times the media puts a focus on serial killers and people that do these heinous crimes, and they give them a sort of fame. And a lot of killers have gone to the news and be like, yeah, I did it because I wanted to get famous, which is so inherently evil. And I think that if we take away, like what the Parkland shooter did, not Parkland shooter, the Parkland author did, they take away that name, takes away a little bit of that power. And I think he handled that well. But on the topic of the shooting as well, that's always a fear. I think that's a fear for everyone.
Valid observation. And it is interesting. Did they also talk about the fact that the shooter had been visited by the FBI and various law enforcement agencies before the shooting?
I don't remember that part of the book as well, but that is very interesting.
And interestingly enough,
should have seen the signs.
There was concerns that, as I'm drawing from history, mind you, ladies and gentlemen, that someone in either Louisiana or Mississippi had been receiving emails, or I guess it was emails, some sort of communications from the shooter, and had expressed concern and had informed law enforcement of this particular situation. And he was actually visited, not once, but I think twice, by law enforcement, just FYI. And that's so
something many lives could have been saved.
Yeah, so why do they keep him in school with the rest of...
Listen, it goes to the issue of innocent until proven guilty, unfortunately. And of course, we have
48-hour hold.
How many lives were lost? I think close to 20?
I think, 15, 20.
15. That's so many.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
McKenna.
So the point, I mean, I don't feel totally comfortable in school, but I feel relatively more comfortable than I would in a large school in, like, say, New York. Like, we live in a smaller coastal town where the crime rates are relatively low in comparison. So although I do always feel that uneasiness, especially just growing up in that education environment with my parents being teachers, I always feel a little uneasy about that. But again, I feel less uneasy and like comparatively, but then like Adriana was talking about how, and like how you were talking about how the person had shown like a history of like maybe violence or something that would possibly demonstrate that he would be a school shooter. I think that the main issue is with, like Sally saying, like there's not really enough educational programs or supportive programs for kids in schools like this. Like the amount of counselors to children that we have in school, or like school psychologists, is really low. Like counselors are handling like 100 or 200 kids at a time, and that way, so they're not able to really get that much individual time with kids that might have a violent history, or that might have some things going on at home, or that might have mental health issues. So I think that that's another thing that's contributing to it, is that there's just not enough like support, especially for mental health issues, due to like the lack of the amount of students too.
It's just such a nebulous area. So.
Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, to McKenna's point, I mean, I think, we don't really live in like comparison to like a crime-ridden town like New York City.
It's pretty
or something
safe
like that.
here.
But also, I think, school shootings in the past haven't necessarily happened in like super populous areas. Like they've happened
No, they have
in small
Columbine.
private schools.
Yep.
Things
Yep.
like that. And I think what really scares me is the fact that because I honestly think a lot of it is the fact that our generation is pretty desensitized when it comes to violence or death or things like that, due to the internet and having unrestricted access to it. So I guess what kind of scares me is that literally anybody could have that access. It doesn't matter where they go. It doesn't matter what school they go to. If they're having a tough time and they have unrestricted access to the internet, like that scares me.
Okay, Charlie, you were going to say.
Well, agreeing with Sally, there's McKenna?
Yeah.
McKenna,
And
yeah.
McKenna. There's always this kind of like looming bit of fear in some ways that it could
Your
happen
antenna
today.
are basically your antenna are up.
Yeah, because it's just constantly, because I don't know all the kids in my school or all the kids in my grade, because one day someone could have just, who I didn't know, just decide like, hey, today's going to be the day. It's just it's just a little bit scary to think about that every now and then, like, hey, it could just happen right now in this classroom.
Elena.
Well, I would say that I think it's definitely scary to think about, and it is something that could happen, but I wouldn't say that for me it's a constant fear that I have.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that it's anything looming. It's like when I think about it, yeah, that's obviously scary, but I don't think about it happening, especially at like West, very often. It just doesn't seem like something that would... I maybe this is my naivety talking. It's probably one of those things where you don't expect it to happen to you until it does.
Right.
That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly how I feel about it. Is I don't expect it to happen until it does. So.
Francis, before I go to the break, go for it.
To touch on what Sally said about how a lot of kids these days are desensitized by violence.
That is an interesting description too. Go ahead.
I especially know exactly what you're talking about, because I have seen people I know personally, like, well, not personally, but like I know them. They've reposted or shared like really violent and disturbing things that you just wouldn't.
I've seen
like,
that too.
Yeah, and it's like so out of left field and such, in my opinion, a clear sign of some type of like mental something going on.
You have to.
Like,
it
worries me.
The concern that it's coming out of left field,
Yeah.
that you can't connect. I'm going to use the alphabet. You can't get to G because you're missing B, C, D, and maybe even E. So, you just leap to that. I see that point. Go ahead, Sally.
And even like, because I know like y'all are probably familiar with this, like on Instagram Reels, there's like this whole thing where you'll open Instagram Reels and you'll just see a car crash.
Yes.
Like you'll see something
Oh
really
my
violent
gosh.
and people will be like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy, ha 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 ha.
And it's so-
like, somebody probably died.
Yeah.
Like this is not funny. Like it's baffling to me how desensitized our generation is.
Yeah.
Yeah. There'll be some times where I'll be... it also hasn't been, like, the most recent, because I've seen, like, a few years ago, you'd see, like, an animal get hit by a car and it'd be made into, like, some kind of joke. Like, have you ever... I imagine I've seen the one where the deer gets hit and, like, goes flying over...
over the
Yeah,
bridge.
yeah.
What?
Yeah. Or there's ones where, like, you'll just see... Like, sometimes I'll open Instagram and it's like, oh, well, there's a car crash, I guess. Darn.
It's so disturbing.
It-
Yeah, I know.
It's
so
It's
scary.
There's
kind
so
of
many
disturbing because I've noticed
people
that
in-
I've started to grow to be like, well, oh, yeah, okay. There's
Yeah.
that. I've seen that video before.
Okay.
Well,
You see it
scroll
so
past.
That's the
scroll past.
desensitization you're talking about.
Exactly.
It's just,
Oh,
I've
okay.
noticed it kind of happening
Okay.
to me
All right.
and others.
Very interesting. We were talking off air about the fact that, and what was the book? Your
It's called
mother.
The Anxious Generation, and it
What's
talks
it called?
about
What generation?
the anxious generation.
Anxious generation.
Yes, and I don't know who
Okay,
the author is. Let me. by David ASJS.
Okay.
This author, and it talks a little bit how like media and the way that the parents are parenting nowadays like impacts the way that the kids' minds are wired. Like, it creates more fear and anxiety. Like with media, and Elena and I were talking off radio about this, how like media puts a lot of pressure on young minds to have a perfect life or to live a certain way. So it creates more anxiety and obviously depression. But
Hold on, let me ask. The theory is that you, meaning your generation, by the way, you're the Z generation, right?
yeah, Gen Z.
Gen Z. You're Gen Z. I want to make sure I got to get this right. And the next generation after you is Alpha, right? Right. Okay. I ought to know this stuff. All right. The theory is that you all are going to become so adept. I love that "you all" part. You are going to become so adept at using this technology that it won't have that kind of influence on you.
Right.
Yeah.
You're all shaking your head no.
I mean, I think the damage has already.
Okay.
I think the damage has already been done. I mean,
Damage is already done?
Because when we're exposed to this stuff while our brains are forming, then I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like it's irreversible.
Yeah,
at
pretty
to a
much.
certain point.
But I kind of go back and forth a little bit with this topic because although I do understand and see how social media could, like, I obviously there is negative effects. Like a lot of platforms do have violent things and a lot of people do feel anxious about the lives that other people are living. But I honestly find that with some social media platforms, it allows me to be more interconnected with the world around me. Like I am learning more about what's happening.
But wait a second. Elena, let me hear that.
Yes. So I think like social media, I think it's a tool. It's a lot like our conversation on
It is,
ChatGPT. It's a tool and you can use it.
But you said
Oh,
something.
yes,
Exploit
off air.
it.
And you can
Yeah.
also abuse it.
And you can also abuse it.
can-
You have to
but-
be
but-
smart enough
but
and
you-
controlled enough to
but
do it.
the other aspect of it was the fact that it's disconnected. For all
Yes.
that it's connected us, there is no personal connection.
Well, so it depends. I think that's when you use it incorrectly. I think the way that I've managed to like use my social media, I use it basically just for like texting my friends.
But wait a second. I'm going to
Exactly.
go back to Sally. You've already been wired to abuse it, Sally.
Right. I mean, I think a way that you abuse it is by wasting your time scrolling on things that don't even matter just because it gives you like some sort of a dopamine hit or
Do
something.
you know what's interesting? I have caught myself on occasion scroll, and I'm not a big social media user, as you all know, but it has happened for me. Okay, let me shift gears on this one about the issue of security. There are two schools in North Carolina, two school systems. One of them is New Hanover, which is down in Wilmington. They're going to install an AI surveillance system.
So what does that entail?
No,
It's
what
going to
even is
have
that?
all of the all of the cameras all over the school, and AI will be in charge of observing what takes place on all those cameras, so that if Adriana is wandering and sneaking down the hall in a fashion that AI thinks is a potential threat, it's going to notify law enforcement, the SRO, or someone in school. Adriana is doing strange things.
I think that in its core, it isn't a horrible idea to have surveillance, but that can be
Pull that microphone.
It could be so easily abused because one kid in a hoodie is walking down the hallway, going to class,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah,
call
I
the
understand.
police.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Charlie.
I mean, it could just look really suspicious. Like, that's so easy to misinterpret. Because if you're like a human person, you can be like, okay, well, obviously this kid isn't really up to much
Exactly.
suspicion. But if it's an AI, it's not going to be able to have that second layer of interpretation
Wait a second.
or assumption.
We're relying on AI for a lot of things, and this is these are two experiments. One is New Hanover County. I've forgotten where the other. I've got it here. I'll look it up. But my first comment to you, or my first question is, do you feel that you're being surveilled? That's the word. Surveilled too much.
Absolutely
Not really.
I don't at all.
Really?
I mean,
No.
there's no cameras in our classrooms. There's just like
Right.
cameras in the
Oh,
hallways.
but that may
Cameras in the
change.
But I also think like if we're talking about, let's say, like a suspicious person in terms of a school shooting, I don't think that AI is going to be able to differentiate any sort of like suspicious activity more than a person could.
Right.
Because like, I mean, with backpacks and stuff, like, how do you think somebody's just carrying a gun through like a hallway? Just
well,
like
theoretically,
going
you're going
off
to have metal detectors at the doors and things of this nature. But we're already relying on AI to determine certain activities. And I might bring up an issue here in warfare. They're able now to, predominantly what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, the war there. The Ukrainians have been using AI for their drones. And the drones are able to distinguish the Russian soldiers in a fashion that within the drone automatically attacks the enemy. Charlie, I'm being the opponent in this issue, but it's happening. Go for it,
Well,
Charlie.
I will say, I mean, I feel like it might be somewhat easier to interpret what an enemy is versus because
Just a
in a
kid.
school you don't really know who the enemy is. You don't have like a defining like okay,
That's true.
they're gonna be wearing this and this and this,
Right.
Or have this specifically. It's just so much harder to interpret. Even
Okay.
even for people, but like it's just for AI specifically, it can't really do that yet.
Okay, McKenna, real quickly.
And that's sort of what I was saying is that like with AI, especially within schools, if they're going to use that as surveillance cameras, I'm assuming that it's going to be heavily more based on what stereotypically looks more suspicious. So like Adriana was saying, or whoever was saying, like if you're wearing a hoodie or walking more briskly, or I don't know, like Sally was making the point that literally anyone has the power to get a gun and take power over the school. So we can't base off, and I'm assuming AI would base off stereotypes, and I
Do you
feel like it's more dangerous that way.
But you guys don't feel overwhelmed by the surveillance at all?
No.
No.
I do.
Oh.
I would
Really?
like
You
to
do?
say.
Okay, Francis, let me hear it.
Because I don't. This isn't just specifically in terms of like AI security. I just like. Do you ever go to Walmart or something and you see yourself on the little monitor and you're like, oh my gosh, what if I look like I'm like stealing right now, even though I'm not stealing, and like
Yes, right.
someone's gonna come get me and be like, oh, you're in big trouble. It's irrational, but I always kind of have that like wariness anytime I see a camera, specifically like a security camera. And I feel like y'all were saying the opportunity.
Do you all ever go to a bank? Have any of you ever been in a bank?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're in one right now.
We're upstairs. But I'm just wondering, you'll notice when you go into the bank, you've got multiple cameras working on you.
It feels like y'all were saying with the potential of AI security, it's like there are so many opportunities to misprofile somebody.
That's
or
what I was saying.
I don't know, that seems really off to me. And I was talking with Ella on the way home from the last Youthpoints. I think there's just such an overprevalence of AI in our daily life in general. And it's really worrying to me, honestly, because it became such like a big thing in the last few years, I feel like. And all of a sudden it's just constantly in your face with everything.
Go ahead, Adriana.
I've been tasked with researching AI for
Yep.
this newspaper.
And-
And I would say that I agree with how prevalent it is now, but it also, we have to keep in mind that this isn't like a brand new idea that just
Spawned.
spawned in 2020. Like this has been in the works since the 1950s, and it was started at its purest form of they just wanted to push science to its furthest point,
Right.
and now it's stealing the place of human creativity,
Right.
and replacing the human mind, which I don't think it's what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to be a machine
But
in itself.
I think, like Adriana was saying, I think that it's been in existence for a long time. A lot of people think of AI and they think of ChatGPT and all these new coming AI, but really it's been around for quite some time. And it's just like we can think back to like when cell phones were first introduced. Like everyone was freaking out, like, oh my gosh,
Case in point, you
technology, da da da.
ask Siri.
Yeah.
Or
It's a calculator is a very simple
Alex,
version of AI.
Yeah.
Eventually, so everyone was freaking out about the invention of cell phones, and now it's just a daily part of our lives. So I think that AI is just going to continue to develop and become a part of our daily lives, using as a tool. I don't think that it should take over. Maybe it can take over a few like minute human jobs but like I've seen people that use AI art in an art show. Like, no,
God,
art
That
is
it's so bad.
it is bad. So I think AI shouldn't be
They're
able to
worried
do
about
those
this.
things.
They're worried about this in the form of music
Yes,
and
absolutely.
creative art.
Writing.
Yeah.
And
Writing.
like, all I know.
Journalism?
Journalism.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. God.
So
Okay.
I worry about it in that sense, but I also think that it is such a great tool for us to use as long as we don't take advantage of it, or as long as it doesn't replace things that humans are inherently better at, like creative things, like art or music or things like that.
Go ahead, Charlie.
AI is inherently better at doing more repetitive tasks.
Exactly.
It's a tool meant to be used for like let's say I'm writing a paper and I'm like, well, I'm not entirely sure I've got all the proper grammar, all the commas. I'll just sometimes if I'm doing, I'll be like,
That's
I'll
what Grammarly
copy
is.
paste it or into Grammarly or ChatGPT, be like, hey, can you just go through this and make sure I've got all the proper grammar, or add commas, or just add punctuation where there needs to be punctuation, so I can get.
But they're now
grade.
using it, for example, on the development of resumes and letters. Corporations are using it. Go ahead, McKenna.
Another issue is a lot of like I said, AI is inherently better at doing repetitive jobs, just like Charlie was mentioning. But there's a few jobs that, like, if you're using AI to like learn in your classroom, or to use a resume, or to apply to a college, and you get to, like, let's say Harvard, and you're studying medicine, and you go through all the classes with, like, using ChatGPT or using another AI platform, and you go and you have to be a doctor, and all of a sudden people's lives are on the line. So it gets to a certain point where you just have to understand where to take advantage
Go
of
ahead,
it.
Charlie, before I go to the break, because we're going to get back to that, McKenna.
You saying that, it made me think of a lot of jokes where it's like me when I see my friend become a doctor knowing he's used ChatGPT throughout his
Yes.
entire
Oh
time
my
in college.
gosh.
Or like
So funny.
me seeing a guy I saw use ChatGPT in college come in to do my surgery, and I'm like, no.
Before we move on from our last topic, I wanted to comment on something about colleges and AI.
Oh, okay. Let me hear it. Let's go for it.
Okay.
We're talking about AI. We were talking a few moments ago because Adriana, we're tasking her with doing some research on AI. And I know that Elon University and a few other schools are involved in this, McKenna,
Yes.
are doing a topic on and research on AI in relationship to universities. Let me hear it from you, Sally.
I was going to say, because I know we were kind of jokingly talking about how easy it is to use ChatGPT or something like that on your studies or on paper or,
Right.
anything. You get through Harvard with using ChatGPT, and then when it's time to be a doctor, you're like, oh, gosh.
Time to, like,
But what have I got myself into? But interestingly enough...
Wait. You're looking at your cell phone. Oh, this is where I insert the
Right.
right, the knife. Yeah,
You're
go
watching
ahead.
You're watching a tutorial on
Yeah,
YouTube.
on surgery. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
right. Oh. But interestingly enough, one of the schools that's top of my list, or actually the school that's top of my list during my application process is Washington and Lee in Virginia. And something that's unique about that school is that they have an honors system, a very, very, like, ingrained into the school honors system where they don't tolerate any sort of cheating, any sort of, like, anything like that. And they actually have a committee of students who you don't know who's a part of it, who see, like, so you're allowed to take any of your tests back and work on them wherever you want because they trust you that much. But if a student, let's say your roommate that you don't know is a part of this thing, sees that you're using the internet on it, you have the chance to be, like, expelled.
You've heard about Starlink. I don't know if you have. Anyhow, this is a program that President Trump has initiated, and he brought in Elon Musk, and he brought in Larry Ellison from Oracle, and a few others, a variety of high-tech minds. And the idea is they're going to use Starlink to create a database, if you will, in preparation for medical treatment. And in essence, they're already saying, I've been reading stories about using diagnostic testing, and AI is able to discern such issues as heart problems or maybe even cancer and a few other items, simply because, to your point earlier, Charlie, it is repetitive research, looking at the data
Detail-oriented.
over and over and over again and comparing various, I don't medical
Samples.
directions, and
Yeah.
then being able to determine. Go ahead,
Right.
Elena. I'm
There
sorry.
you go. So I think obviously that's very concerning.
Mm-hmm.
But I also would like to make the point that there is like a lot of medical what's the word I'm looking for?
I have no idea.
Discrimination. Medical discrimination. And I know I hear so many stories, especially of women who are told, oh no, it's fine, or like stuff like,
Oh.
oh no,
Especially
you're
with
just on your
heart
period.
disease, yeah.
And it's like a heart disease or it's something like really
Yeah.
bad. And they're like, okay, well, I almost just died because you thought that this was just normal.
They
And it's just medical negligence.
Yeah,
which
well,
I think
it
that's
is.
something like the AI could
Could
potentially
possibly
help
fix,
mitigate.
yeah.
yeah.
But it's also scary. So I don't know. I don't trust it is the issue.
Yeah, I'm hesitant.
I mean, it would be.
Adriana.
I think in itself it's a great idea because those heart problems and those conditions kill so many people every year, and if there's a way to fix it or a way to catch it
Identify
beforehand,
it.
Right.
it could save so many lives. And of course it's going to be scary because it's a computer telling you, and you never know if it's actually going to be true. But I think of it kind of like an MRI machine. Like that's a computer,
Yeah.
and that saves lives. So
It's a good point. All right, it gets down to the point where do we trust AI? That's the real issue. And of course, I brought that up in relationship to security. So for what it's worth, go ahead, McKenna. We've got 15 seconds.
Oh, well, I think for analyzing data, it makes sense. But then there's certain medical like issues that you can't diagnose just based off data. Like
Yeah.
things present differently in different people.